And welcome to Tim Staton Stating the Obvious for our second YouTube video where we're taking the show live to you podcast, from a live podcast to in person via YouTube. I can't say enough to say how excited I am that we are able to be here just 12 weeks after we launched our first podcast. So thank you guys for showing up and for everyone who's here. Like I stated in my earlier video this week, that we are going to make sure, that we're talking about talent management from the perspective of a nonprofit organization and volunteers. So, Nate, I don't know what happened to your video, but you just came back, so that's awesome. Before we get into tonight's show, though, I do want to introduce you to our special guest, Dr. Nate Staton. He is the lead pastor of Anothen Church, and he has been involved in volunteer-based organizations for 15 years, as well as various management occupations. I'm excited that he's able to be on tonight's show, one, because he's my brother, and two, because he's an awesome leader. So welcome to the show, Nate.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks so much for having me tonight. I'm excited to talk about what you got on the tab tonight and just kind of sharpen each other through that.
Yeah, I'm just glad that we were able to sync our schedules up and make this live event happen. I know earlier tonight that you had a little hiccup, which is cool. That's the thing I like about doing the live show is, you catch people in their real life and everyday events. And, leadership isn't this nice, neat, clean thing that people like to portray, that nothing ever goes wrong in their life or nothing ever, happens by accident. I think everything happens on purpose, and that's good. So I'm just glad that you were able to make it here tonight. So before we get into, our conversation, I do have to go over some anecdotal procedural stuff, which is one, the chat bar is right down below here. So I know, Nate, you can't see it, but as a question comes up and we start getting feedback, when we get to a good stopping point, I'll pause and say, hey, this is a question that so-and-so asked and offered up to you, and then I'll answer it as well. So that way we can have that part, so we have an engaged conversation from people joining in. Also, it's on the chat bar. If you're looking at YouTube, it's going to be off on the side screen, so you can also chat in there. But for everyone who's viewing this at a later date, it's at the bottom, like right here, so you can view what questions were asked and when it was stated. Two, I asked that if you ask a question, please make sure it's appropriate and on topic. And then if for some reason the feed gets interrupted or something happens, I know last time we went to a live show, it took about 5 minutes to reboot everything and bring it back up. So if something happens, then everything goes kaput, then we'll just regroup and come back, and hopefully you're here still with us. And lastly, this show represents my ideas and the ideas of my guests. They do not necessarily reflect the ideas or official stances of any organization that I may currently work for or have worked in the past. They are my ideas, so these are Tim ideas and these are Nate's ideas, founded in education and training that we have had, as we've gone through our jobs. So I know it sounds crazy, but it's just some anecdotal stuff I had to put out there to make sure everyone knows that I'm on my time, not anybody else's time. So Nate, are you still there after all that?
I am, yes. Absolutely.
Sorry, man, I know that's a lot.
No, I understand the liabilities and everything. Oh, yeah.
All right. So, I was thinking about, when we talked about talent management from a nonprofit organization and a volunteer basis, so in your line of work, so a person comes up to you and says, hey, I want to lead something. And then, what happens? How does that usually happen in your experience? And how do you take somebody who may not necessarily have any leadership experience or a little leadership experience, and maybe even they think they have a lot of experience, but instead they have a lot of growth that they've got to do? So how do you want to talk about that?
So from, the various positions that I've been involved with volunteer-based organizations, is the first thing is we want to make sure that everybody understands the mission of what we're doing and why we're doing it, because that is one of the awesome things about volunteer based organizations, is you have people that want to be there. So you already have that going for you. You already have that motivation of that they believe in what's happening. They want to be there, and so now on top of that, they want to have an input, a voice, and a significance to the organism and the organization. And so we always start off with making sure people understand what the purpose, what the mission is. Especially in today's culture, it's imperative that everybody's on the same page, so we don't veer off, 2-3 years down the road, because we want volunteers for the long haul, and we also want to see them progress in leadership, and we'd love to do it in house as opposed to doing outsourcing. So we define the mission and make sure we all understand the mission, make sure that the definition's the same. So from a church standpoint, our church mission statement is life and life abundantly in Christ. Okay, so from that perspective, we sit down with our leaders, and we want to make sure we all have the same vocabulary and definitions that go with the vocabulary, so there can never be any wiggle room, and we're all marching to the same beat towards the same vision. From there, once they catch the vision, they receive the vision, then we go through a training process, and we go through core values, and we go through our leadership culture, because we have a core value section, but we also have a leadership culture. What we see and feel is the ideal situation for us based upon our cultural location, geographical location, what would make a healthy and functional leadership culture. And we just go by those values. And at that point, after they've kind of go through that 3-tier process, then we just start talking to them about what's their giftings and what are their passions. Usually their giftings and passions go hand in hand. And from there, we're able to see, okay, this is their gifting or this is their passion. So for instance, if somebody is highly organized, and incredibly administratively gifted, I don't want to waste their time and their gifting with more laborious action. That's probably more manpower, more people who are hands-on, like to be involved in those kind of things. These are the people that I'll want in meetings with me, because they'll think of things in a perspective that I won't. And so we just place them where they are gifted wise. But also from that, what are you most passionate about too? We want people passionate about what they do, especially because they're doing it and they're not getting paid to do it. So that the driving force is their passion, and they agree with the purpose. And when their passion and purpose collaborate and combine, then what I've been blessed to see is, like, a lot of people, man, if they believe in something that's happening, they'll go the extra mile and then some. And we can do it on an average Sunday morning. For instance, we have in our kids ministry alone, 11 people with their gifts, their abilities. So some are just check in. They're very personable. They're very, like, they never meet a stranger when they go in the room, right? So we want them at the check-in table, because that's who you want there. If I'm going to have my kid dropped off, or if I'm a reserved individual, I'll want somebody warm and welcoming. I may not necessarily want them teaching a lesson, because nothing will ever get done because they're too social. So we want them in their gifting. But we have well over 20 people every Sunday morning collaborating for the same mission as well throughout the week. So we go through the 3-tier process of, this is our mission, this is how we define our mission, this is how we go about doing the mission, and this is the culture that we want to develop in a healthy structure. And so this is how we do things. It's not going to budge. It's not going to change. And that really gives a constant, I found that to give a constant form of stability to people who are looking for stability, but want to grow as leaders and grow as people. So from there, we place them into their giftings.
So you mentioned a lot of stuff, which is really good in a short amount of time. So I just kind of want to break it down a little bit, because not everyone who's watching this will understand, like, mission statements. So I know that I have always struggled with mission statements, because sometimes they're really long, and they're like 3 lines, they're like 3 sentences, and how do you really get that out there to people, because I have asked people, hey, what is your mission statement? And not a single person in that organization can like remember their mission statement, but they can remember something obscure that happened 2 or 3 weeks ago. That's like a urban legend or something like that. They can remember all those details, but they can't remember the mission statement. They work for the organization, So how do you go about enforcing your mission statement? Because it's important in leader development that people understand the mission statement. So how do you go about doing that?
So we consistently, not just myself, but the other leaders, and that's one of the big things you brought up is really good. I can't be the only one saying the mission statement. If I'm the only one saying it, that hasn't caught, it hasn't taken root. And so when more people are continuously bringing to the forefront of the conversation and the environments that we're at, whether it be in a school that we're serving, or in a neighborhood we're serving, or on Sunday mornings in the church we're serving, everything we do is geared towards that. So in the back of their mind, they're always thinking, is what I'm doing helping people find life and life abundantly in Christ? If it's not, and conversation wise too, is this adding to that element, or is it taking away? And what happened, and I think how really it was able to catch very well, is from the very beginning. Any conversation I had, I was very deliberate, somewhat annoying, but very deliberate in making sure that got through, because the it was worth the risk of being annoying, as opposed to the risk of being accepted for the moment. Because if the mission doesn't get across, the mission will never be accomplished. And so we were able to develop in that culture, this is what we mean by life and life abundantly in Christ. And every Sunday morning, or Mondays or Tuesdays, I'd call our different leaders, and I would ask them, how did you see that happen? Can you tell me how you saw that happen? And I let them teach me, and I let them share with me how it was. And in the same way, in their small groups, all the different types of communities that we have, we communicate that. And so probably at least 3 times every Sunday, I communicate that everywhere on our website. So for people who have a volunteer-based website, or volunteer-based ministry, nonprofit, whatever it may be, everywhere on your page, somewhere on that page needs to be your purpose and your mission statement. So it is captain obvious of what you're doing, whether anyone agrees with it or not. That way, that statement is communicated, and they know what it is, and they can't hide from it. So no time during the culture, in the building up of the culture, can anybody say, hey, I really didn't know what we were about or what the mission was. And so for us, we just operate in what we found as truth. And so I think every organization operates in that level to some certain extent. And so you have to agree, okay, this is truth, this is what we're going by. So whether it be like a nonprofit organization that, you know, feeds the homeless, or clothes them, or whatever it may be, there's so many different opportunities for 501c3 opportunities and volunteer-based organizations. Whatever it is, we have the opportunity to instill that vision and continuously let people know, this is what we're about, this is why we're about it, and this is the source that we all respect and agree on, that has something to say about it, that we're going to agree is going to drive us to do what we do. So the mission statement for us, it was pretty easy because it's in the Bible, but other people, it may not be as simple though. And whatever it is, you want to have something that is bulletproof. For us, when people are like, so why is that your mission statement? Well, that's what Jesus said. Okay, that makes sense. So like if you're wanting to help orphans or whatnot, you may have some type of nugget of truth that came from Mother Teresa or something like that, Well, Mother Teresa said, you have an authoritative source to point towards, and you have an anchor that's bulletproof. Like nobody's going to argue with Mother Teresa. So it's a good thing to have that. So our mission statement was very simple when we found it. We're just going to continue championing it in our conversations, on our website, on our social media platforms, on any piece of paper we give out. It's going to be on there. And so that's really kind of how we come up with a mission statement, is we wanted to come out of the source of what's driving us to do the mission.
Yeah, no, that's really really good. One, that your mission statement is it's catchy and people know it, and it's right there and up front and with you. I'm reminded of, so I volunteer at a horse rescue, like a lot, and so does Joey. But it's just very long mission statement, and so not a lot of people kind of understand what she does, other than she rescues horses and she's very passionate about horses and makes sure that they don't go to slaughter because that's what her thing is. But you catched on another thing that I think is very very important, is defining what words mean, because it's very interesting. So like in my line of work, I could say this is X, Y, and Z, and somebody else will say, well, this is X, Y, and Z. And we're talking about two completely different things because the person doesn't understand that the indoctrination period, is and what the doctrine says about that organization and what those words mean. So we're literally talking about two different things. So how do you go about making sure? I'm not saying that people are indoctrinated, but how do you understand that people have a shared common understanding and shared common understanding of what those words mean? Because I could say, we can live life and live life abundantly, but what does that really mean, and how do you portray that so that everybody has the same understanding and goal when you're moving forward, because your purpose is clear and your motivation is clear, but how do we make sure that we're clear on the same words?
So we have something we call Anothen 101. And anybody who wants to serve within Anothen has to go through this course. It's myself and all the ministry leaders, and we sit down and we just have conversation with them. And we do this, by the way, we do this about every 7 to 10 months, and we've spaced this out for the purpose of longevity and having leaders who really do believe in what's happening and not just trying to, whatever it may be, just be a blip on the radar. But enforcing the doctrine, though, or enforcing the terminology, we sit down and we have very long conversations and really great conversations where we talk about, this is what we mean by life and life abundantly, and what it means to have that, how it is we have that, what it looks like. We also talk about like what it doesn't look like, and so we're able to define and throw out some abstract ideas, but at the same time create an absolute picture that we're all running towards. And so us having the opportunity for our volunteers to come talk with us and us to talk with them, we're giving them access to us because we want to, one, like half the time in these Anothen 101 platforms, I'm getting a ton of information of how to be better. More than I am getting vision, I'm learning how to be better, and how to communicate things better and how to create the environment to be better. And so I think allowing that dialogue creates an avenue of trust, but it also creates an avenue where we trust the dialogue that's coming across. So the mission statement they're receiving, they believe in it more because it's not just a piece of paper with a statement on it now. It's a person with an invested interest in their life and wanting this mission to be a part of their life. And so, one of the crucibles for that is, making sure your life is exemplifying that, if not in perfection, which for me is not going to be imperfection, but for consistency's sake. So if a mistake is made, I acknowledge it and I confess it so that people know the norm was broken or the mission, so to speak, was broken, and here's how I messed up, and here's how I was able to get back to better standards, better progress. So we have very intentional conversations. We want them to ask questions like that. And I think it's the best thing volunteer ministries and volunteer organizations can do. Let your volunteers ask questions. Let them ask questions that'll rub you the wrong way, because they don't mean to. They really don't mean to rub you the wrong way. They want to. They're there asking you the question because they believe in what's happening. So whether it's that, like you said, the horse rescue, whatever it may be, people are there because they believe in it. So the questions they're asking with a vested interest. They're there. And so one of the best things we can do is listen to the people who are there. and move from that. And when the proximity is our best friend in leadership, because when they're with us, we can pour into them and vice versa. And so that vocabulary we use, the definitions we use, we'll even have times in meetings where someone will say something, we're like, no, we don't talk like that. Like it's just simple phrases that we're like, yeah, probably not the best way to phrase that, and it's a confusing way to phrase that. And so, from the top perspective, the top part of leadership, we're intentional with our vocabulary and defining it with our life, but at the same time, it trickles down, kind of like monkey see, monkey do, and allowing it to take place that way.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So you brought up a lot of other very, very valuable insights. So, for instance, you brought about personal accountability when being in a leadership position. So it's not just we have our mission statement, we have the words that we say, we know what they mean, but you have your life that backs it up. You have to emulate that as well, because otherwise you're just people doing things that don't mean anything because your actions aren't congruent with your words. So very, very good point in bringing that up, and also acknowledging our own mistakes when they happen, and doing it. It's very interesting that you say that people ask questions, they kind of rub you the wrong way, because I always equate leadership as me walking around with a mirror, because everybody that I interact with at some point in time is going to reflect something back about myself. It's like, oh man, did that really happen? Yeah, you know what? You're absolutely right. I am not even close to where I should be. Thank you for bringing it up. And, there's a lot of people out there who I think are, I would say, toxic leaders, because they can't acknowledge that feedback and internalize it for improvement. We ask for accountability when we build teams and we build people. We ask accountability for ourselves and we ask accountability for them. So, when you talk about a volunteer base, because some people may not like being held accountable. They're like, dude, I'm volunteering. I may not be getting paid for this, or if I am getting paid for this, it may be very minuscule, and I didn't even plan on talking about this, but since you brought it up, so like how do people handle accountability, and how do you work through that? Because I'm sure that could drive people off.
Yeah, so it does. And I think that is actually, I 100% believe that is a uh, uh, irreplaceable thing that we can do, is to be willing to say that our culture and our leadership is accountable. Um, so for instance, I planted this church. People can tell me no. Okay. Some people are thinking, okay, if it's an organization, you start the organization. Why is it that people can tell you no? Well, because one of the things that I've learned most is that some of the greatest leaders I've ever met were surrounded by people who are better leaders than them, wiser than them, smarter than them, and they made them look really good. And so we need people in our corner to tell us no. We need people in our corner to tell us, hey, we can't do this. So on the foundation level of starting this organization from the scratch up, it was, we're not going to compromise. If you want to serve here, this is a part of the culture. And if you don't like it, we respect that. But it may be time to relocate. And we say that only because you want, when people are encountering the environments that you create, whether it be at the horse farm, a shelter, whatever it may be, a church, you want the culture to reflect the vision and the mission. And if you compromise at any level, the smallest compromise can make the ship sink. And so there are people who are like, I'm here to volunteer. You need me. And most of the time, my response is, I need your gifting. And these people need your gifting, but it's only best when it's held accountable. So for instance, if I go up there and say whatever I want on Sunday mornings and have no accountability, it's reckless and dangerous. However, if I have a source of accountability, which I have 3, 4 guys that talk to me and critique me, which is not always fun, but it is good, and I'm thankful for it. And I've learned to embrace that stink, if you will, like, 'cause it's not the best to hear. These are your flaws. You said too many times. You didn't communicate this well enough. but it's effective because leaders want to be better, and leaders want to lead people with excellence. And especially on the volunteer basis, excellence is only going to equate to everybody believing in what is happening and why it's happening. So not even compromising placing a leader, no matter how good their gifting is, don't compromise. Doesn't matter who they are. If they can't follow the creed and be a part of the community, and I've made this mistake, it's I've I've tasted the regret, and I've tasted the backlash of me just not standing in what I knew was right. And every leader has that instinct. This isn't right. This isn't good. They're not. We get that perception and that discernment, and it's okay to be like, okay, you're gifted as can be, but you are not a team player, so we have no purpose for you. There is a purpose for you, but we can't use it here. It just doesn't follow our what we do. So being willing to say no and being willing to lose a potential rock star for the gym that's waiting to come.
Yeah, that's so powerful, in what you said. Like, it's okay to be willing to let somebody go who could be phenomenally talented, but they're not good for the organization when building your team. So you also brought up the point about mentorship and coaching. Even the best athletes always have a coach telling them how to do things better. And then I remember I was doing my research for my mentorship podcast and my mentorship YouTube live episode, the one before this one. So if you guys want to go check that one out, go check it out. But in that, actually, the president of World Bank, I'm horrible, I just forgot his name. But he actually did an interview, and he said that he had a good friend who was like a top surgeon. That he was like in the top of his field. And, he said, hey, he hired another guy to watch him perform surgeries and critique him. Because he said, if I am the best one that there is, I can always get better because people deserve better from me. And so just like you said, it's always good to have that somebody else looking at you from the outside and critiquing you, providing you some insights that you might not see yourself to get better. Since we're talking about a developmental framework on leader development, so correct me if I'm wrong, but what I've heard you so far say is that you provide on-the-job training where you get people with experience and you give them, your organizational level training, which is, this is our mission, this is what the words mean, and this is what we're about, and this is how we go about doing it. And that's kind of like one sphere that you work on. I know there's others, but just to recap that little bit, is that what you're talking about?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and in doing that, and that's very foundational, because at that point, that's like tier one. Because once they're serving, now we want it so that they're developing leaders, and they're creating leaders, so that I'm not the only one doing it, our staff isn't the only one doing it, that everybody knows that they have the freedom and significance to create leaders in the culture and the way we have it.
Yeah. So yeah, that's really powerful too, because now you also have a framework where you provide that organizational level training and foundation based tier knowledge, which is incredibly informative moving forward for everyone involved. But now you've also established a peer developmental framework as well. So within the organization, you can grow it and you can grow people within, so that way you're not necessarily having to look from without and having to re-indoctrinate people and bring people back in.
Right. So every leadership transition we've had in the past 4 years has been able to be filled with without losing any competency in house. And you're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different transitions that have taken place, healthy transitions where the people just no longer felt like that was what they could offer to the community anymore. So their leadership was pouring into other people, developing someone to take over for them at one point. And that's one thing I think is really encouraging, at least from my perspective, is to see other people. And that's what happens when you create this type of community. in any organization is people celebrate other people's success. So, like, it's not a success if I'm the only person that's being acknowledged for anything good. It's a success if everybody is being acknowledged for the same thing and having the opportunity, if they choose to take it, to better themselves and be put in positions of influence and leadership that could surpass anything I could ever do.
Okay, so now we have, we've got somebody who they've said, hey, I want to be a leader in this volunteer organization. You've given the foundational framework of this is who we are, this is what we believe, this is how we're moving forward. So what comes next for them?
After that, I ask a question that I wish I would have known 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and I ask why. Why? Because motive drives the mission and how we implement the mission more than I think I realized in the beginning. And that motive can corrupt a mission. And so once I know that their motive is to add to what we have existing and to create it even greater and better with the same standards, with the same leadership culture. And again, people will always bring in new qualities that we need. So it's not that we're afraid of new qualities or new strengths. We just want to stay within our leadership culture and our core values and our mission statement. So it'll take all strengths, sizes, and people weaknesses. We even need weaknesses to make us better. And I know that sounds kind of paradoxical, but that really does help the team. And so at that point, when they're able to sufficiently answer the why, and what I'm looking for in the answer for the why is, I don't want to hear anything about me. It can't be about me. And the reason is because volunteer organizations, volunteer anything, there has to be the common good of people and the common theme and the drumbeat really driving everything we do. If you have one chief in the mix who thinks they need to take over somehow, it creates a kink in the foundation and causes a mess. And so when we know that the why is good and we know that their why is sincere, then from there, when they come in there, they go over training in their individual placement. So our whether it be greet team, your musician, you have one-on-one mentorship, you have one-on-one conversation with the leader directly with you, but also what you have is a group of people who have been involved with that leader, who are able to back up the validity and sometimes the mad scientist mindset of what they believe. And it really creates a cool movement of seeing that person walk onto that platform they're given and really thrive because they're having access to their immediate leader. They can ask any question they want. They can give input as well. And I think one of the really awesome things is that we see each other sharpening each other because we allow the input to go both ways. And so, once somebody is trained sufficiently, and how we train is, again, one-on-one. I just prefer the one-on-one methodology. There's other methodologies that are great, and probably other settings I would use differently. But being that it's an organization we start from scratch and one that needs the same consistent voice over and over again, we prefer one-on-one mentorship. And then the peers sharpening each other because they're in the same culture. But the leader will train them how to do what they do, and then we give them freedom to work that out with their strengths in that particular field. So we don't want to create robots. We want to create an environment where people can use their gifts for the platform that gifting is intended, and to have the freedom to use it the way that they use it, as long as it meets with our core values and all that.
Yeah, you've touched on a lot of good things again, also in a short period of time. So, asking somebody their why, why do you want to serve? I think is an excellent way to get to the root of people's motives and intent, because like your mission statement, that is your why for your organization. it's funny. I had an episode a couple weeks ago. We talked about what is your why and finding your why and how do you get about your purpose and why you're doing what you're doing. And then, if you're doing things for the wrong reasons, it's going to show. So if you're doing it for money or for fame or for prosperity, it's going to show that that's exactly what you're doing it for versus doing it for, I just want to make people's lives better. And especially in your organizations, that's all about people and all about, enriching people's lives so they can live life and live life abundantly, like you have said. You've got to make sure that you have the people's why done. So I think that's really, really good that you've done that. But you also talked about how you do a lot of one-on-one mentorship. So that seems like it takes a lot of time to develop somebody. So when you talk about, the risk and reward of, am I going to do one-on-one or am I going to do mass or another technique? When are you going to decide that, hey, we can't afford to do one-on-one anymore? Or are you going to stick with, I'm going to continue to do one-on-one because it's that important to me?
So we do have platforms where we have our ministries come together. So like our A Kids team will come together and we'll have a once or twice a year training of going over policy, procedure, do's, don'ts, encouragement, and a time of Thanksgiving, thanking them for what they've done and encouraging them for the work of excellence that they've been doing. So we do have those large platforms where we are communicating, information to the masses. But when it comes to our key leaders, people who have said, I want to do this, and we know it is a high impact leadership capacity, that will always be one-on-one. But when it comes to like training, like our worship pastor, he leads the worship team. I don't do the one-on-one. What we do is we have an environment where many leaders can mentor many people. And so I work with our key leaders, our pastors and ministry directors. And so, for instance, I'm not sure like how other organizations may be run, but maybe you have a director of a center and 2 assistant directors and a couple interns. I would pour into my assistant directors and have them pour into the rest so that my time is focused on sharpening them and them sharpening me. But at the same time, they're creating the expectation that there's no idle mouth here. Everybody is a voice pointing us in the right direction and reinforcing what's going on. And that really does help when we have the larger gatherings too, like with our A Kids teams and our worship teams when they meet, because they're getting the same information on a mass level, but at the same time, they've had that one-on-one connectivity where it's really reinforcing what they've been heard and spoken to one-on-one. In larger organizations, you can't do one-on-one as often. You have to be more strategic. Which leaders need one-on-one so that they can communicate to the masses what needs to be communicated. And I've had to do that in other positions before where, there's like 500-600 people there. And, even the idea of only having 5 or 6 people that I'm pouring into is good. It should happen. But there has to be other avenues of communicating that through communicating vision to the people. So we've used platforms like blogging. We've used platforms like communicating through our app, sending reminders, emails, mass text messages. So like what we're doing now, Skype. I've been able to do group message or group videos on Zoom, the app Zoom, and that way we can collaborate at convenient times and not take up people's time. But at the same time, they're able to hear my voice and they're able to hear my heart and vice versa. And so I'm pretty set on one-on-one development, but there is a point, and I've gotten there before, where you have to have an opportunity to communicate with people in an effective fashion. And so I like this Zoom app for that because you can mute other parties when you need to mute them and just take over the conversation.
True.
And, whereas if you're in a room, which nothing beats the face-to-face conversation in a room, but for the purposes of keeping my schedule healthy, my time and their time well stewarded, No volunteer wants wasted time. And so they came to hear what I have to say, not because I'm a big deal, but because of just that's my function in the relationship at the time. And they need to hear from me more than crazy Eddie, talking about whatever. So the Zoom app I've really appreciated, and really liked, because you can do multiple people on there. And I've done many meetings through that, where I can talk to numerous people. And like you mentioned, the question, the link below here, they can shoot me a question and I can answer that question to the group, and acknowledge them by, hey, great question, great input, or so and so wrote this, good suggestion. Let's try that this week. And so yeah, collaboration is important. You need to have the ability to reach the masses, especially leadership wise. But one of the cool things that we've been able to do starting from scratch is we've been able to implement the one-on-one mentorship, and having many mentors and many voices in your life. So yeah, that's kind of, I hope that answers it
Yeah,
somewhat.
no, it does. I would say, I guess like another question I would have is, what do you think for a nonprofit or a volunteer based organization, when you're starting out your framework? Because this is the way I kind of view it, and I know I'm kind of bouncing off subject for a second, but it's important to get right back to it. So I am more of the like academic of this is the framework and everything else, and you are the more, this is how I implement it every single day, and this is what I live, and this is what I do because I am the leader of my organization, and that's what I want viewers to be able to see, is not just, from my typical background or, people I may know, but of various different organizations and types. So getting back to what you said, that you do one-on-one mentorship and you view that as very important. I also view it very important. One, because they get it directly from the source, so you know exactly what you're putting into somebody and investing in, and vice versa. And then the other thing is what do you think the span of control or the amount of people that one person can handle and mentor into? What do you recommend starting off with?
So I like the 3-to-1 ratio. One high impact leader into three strategic leaders. Three leaders that you want to pour into, and that's just a number that kind of works for me. Um, I know guys who do 1-to-5, 1-to-7. Larger churches, they're doing 1-to-10, 1-to-20, and their schedules look differently. I don't know how they do the 120. That seems very overwhelming to me, but different leaders have different capacities. So I respect that, and one of the things I learned while I was managing at Liberty is that people were responding to the vision of, when I worked for Campus Recreation, they responded to the vision better when I was doing it with them. And that doesn't mean I'm doing everything or I'm hands on. I'm actually pretty laissez-faire in management, but I'm pretty vocal just in my presence in their life. I'm not going to be looking over their shoulder, but I'm going to be celebrating with them in front of them, in front of their face. And one of the things I noticed is that people would respond in our large group meetings. And at first, I thought it was like because I couldn't do a meeting. Like I really felt like I could not effectively lead a meeting because nobody was really catching what I was throwing when 40 50 um, 40 50 employees were there. I'm like, nobody's getting this. But when it's me and the four people on shift talking and collaborating, I can tell them what I expect at the beginning of the shift and not have to worry about the rest of the time. And so I kind of went to the 1-to-3 ratio with that, because there is a framework at Liberty. They have their creed, they have their expectations, uniform. I mean, you name it. But the 1-to-3 ratio, it works for me. But for me, the reason it works is, one, I'm able to have quality communication with them, meaning they're not they're not people that are on do not disturb, my phone or whatever during the day. They're people that have a special ringtone where I know if they're contacting me, it's a big deal and they need my attention. Vice versa. So I'm able to be intentional with them. I'm able to be interactive with them. And it lasts for a season, though. It doesn't last for years. I can't keep. I mean, nobody can. Nobody can pour into me year after year after year the same way they do. And so usually it's a 1-to-3 ratio, and the time frame of that I try to do 12 to 18 months, and that's just with this organization. If it's a different organization, it may be shorter because your leaders, like for a church, we expect to live life with people. But if it's an organization where, like say the horse ranch, you don't know how long people are going to live in the area. So you may need to communicate that information quicker and train people quicker. And that's the way it was at Liberty too. This student is going to be gone in 6 to 12 months. I still need my scholarship next year. So I need to train them in a way that is effective so that they keep their job, I keep my job, and the creed and all that is maintained. So 1-to-3 is my ratio, 12 to 18 months. And again, a lot of it's cultural and situational and the structure you're in. I know that seems really vague, but for me, it's very, I visualize it because I see how it was at Liberty, and you had to have structure and you had to abide in that. Everybody knew it. We had the mass meetings and it was good. I was training 1 or 2 people to take my job because they want you to do that. And because the person who was my boss was training me to take his job. And so there was that culture of development in there. But again, it was just him and me. So the ratio for him and his leadership development was 1 leader to 2 employees. And so, and that was at a high level too. So I think 1-to-3 at this level is good. And it depends on the demands of the culture you're in. Some leadership cultures are more needy than others. And so maybe it has to be less people for a season.
Yeah, you bring up a couple good points again. I know I keep saying that, but it's true. They are very, very good points. So, like for instance, you said the culture. Could you define culture so that everyone understands what we're talking about when we say culture? So that way we're talking on the same terms. I don't want people thinking culture as in, I'm from the South and I'm from the North, so I eat grits in the South and oatmeal in the North, or vice versa. So what do we mean when we're talking about organizational culture?
So culture is, if you could smell in how you would describe the smell, how you would describe the taste based upon what you see, what you hear, how it's done, why it's done. For instance, at Liberty, there's a big name, that runs everything there. And so, you don't go against that one big name. So the culture is, hey, if that's what, Falwell says, do it. And you do it, and you do it to honor them because you want to be a good leader and a good employee. At the same time, that's a culture that's based off of one man's idea. And that people believe in it. So the second thing is that the culture too then is words people say, how people do things. And so, for instance, the culture I'm in now is a lot different than cultures I've been in before. So the culture I'm in now is defined by a lot of people having a lot of responsibility, but having the freedom to do it. Whereas if you're in a culture, again, the culture being defined as why you do what you do, and what's the reason behind it. And motive and culture go hand in hand, I think, too, because the motive drives the employees and volunteers. But I know it's a long phrase, but so it's kind of hard to say what culture is in one statement. But culture is a combination of people, personalities, what's accepted, what's not accepted, what's the par. Does par even matter? Like I've been places where you could have a par, and it's like, oh, well, nobody cares because nobody abides by it.
Yep.
So the respecting of the par, the desires, so it's really the internal things that are driving people that are silent, but they're communicated by the way we're living.
Yeah, no, that's a really good definition. I just want to make sure for the people that are watching and listening to this that they understand what we mean by culture. And by the way, I know that we talked about the chat bar. So far, no one has asked any questions, and that's okay. I don't even know who's watching because I don't have it up. I have my own program up. I just know that Brandon had made a comment that he likes the wisdom being spoken. And I said thank you on that one. But for your culture, you talked about how you had a vision and you can see what you want it to look like. You can visualize what that culture looks like, and then take that and let other people know. And I think a lot of leaders struggle with being able to articulate what they see in their head and what the end result is, and getting that out there so that people can do something with it. That's the whole point of this show, is taking leadership principles into something you could use every single day. So and I say that because all too often people go into organizations, people say things that's not backed up by words, and the culture says this is what we do, and their actions don't match it. So it's kind of like a disjointed culture. But when you talk about culture, creating a culture of development and making sure that someone can, you train other people and they replace your job and move up. So how does your organization deal with success and people wanting to move up and develop and grow, and how do we celebrate that?
So I think the first thing that I think we really need to address is sincerity. People can see right through a false "I'm proud of you." Um, like you could probably see in the news every once in a while when somebody congratulates somebody on something they've done, and you really know in their mind they're thinking, "Yeah, congratulations, you stink," whatever. So genuinely, like having it one as the leader, as the primary leader, having it instilled in you, however that has to come about, it has to be there that you want to see people succeed, even if it means they succeed to places you want to be or dreamed you would be. And so when people actually see you sincerely celebrating that, then they know that it's okay in that culture to celebrate, and it's okay to be happy when other people are doing well. So in my 1-to-3 ratio right now, I have 3 different leaders. And one of the ways that I celebrate their success is I sow financially into their development as a leader personally from me. And so I'm personally sowing financially um, into areas to make them better leaders in what they do. It'd be easy for me to hold on to that money and be like, I don't want you to get better because you might leave. And that's a very real possibility. And so I think one of the things that I had to learn pretty quickly was when our first worship pastor, he was very gifted, and it was evident. Like, man, he belonged in a larger environment to create his gifting, to create more leaders. And so he was with us for 7 months, and he left. And I remember feeling kind of helpless when he left because I didn't know how to replace him, but I knew that I was really excited for him. So I let my excitement be seen more than my confusion as what to do next in front of others, because I genuinely was excited. Like I was really excited for Dan, and I still am. He got to see, taste things that I have not yet. So I think people seeing that helps when they see the sincerity, but also when you make celebration intentional and a part of the every fiber of who you are. So all throughout the year, usually it's the summertime for us. We thank our ministry leaders and we celebrate their victories and what they've done. And so, in celebrating them, we bring them up in front of everybody and we celebrate and we give times of Thanksgiving, because I think Thanksgiving and celebration go hand in hand. And it's really hard to celebrate something you're not thankful for. And so when we're celebrating, we're being thankful for what they've done, and it's really contagious because I've started to see, um, I started to see other leaders emulating that in their ministries. Like, so every once in a while, I would give the staff something, just a little something to say thank you, but something that they knew that it was significant from me. I started to notice the other ministry leaders doing that, and they were buying things and sewing into people's lives. And I was like, man, that's really cool. Like, I didn't mean to do that on purpose. That was really cool. And that hit me. It was like a light bulb. This is healthy. This has to be the par, and nothing less can be accepted. And so, um, yes, sincerity, the intentionality of celebrating it in the places it matters most. So making it a big deal that you do celebrate those things in front of everybody, because that's not a one-on-one mentorship moment. That is that's you and everybody their moment. and they need to know this is how we feel about this. And if it's done sincerely and it's done intentionally, people will take it and run with it and love it. If it's done where there's any question in your mind, where do they really want to be a launch pad, or do they, really want to keep them? People can read through that too. So sincerity is huge to that, and sincerity breeds more sincerity. So yeah,
No, that's awesome that you're able to do that. I've seen leaders try to do things sincerely, and it comes off hokey and quirky and doesn't come off quite right. So those things are kind of hard because, like you said, if you have a really talented person who's working with you, and they're just a rock star type person, and something else better comes up, and it's better for them personally, professionally, and it's growth for them, and you're excited for them, and then you're like, man, but I got this huge hole I'm gonna have to fill within my organization. That's a real thing that a lot of people, I think, holds people back, because I think sometimes people are afraid to develop people to the point where they will surpass you or that organization, because they don't want to have to go back and try to find that void that just left. So the fact that you're able to celebrate that and reward that is awesome. And you even mentioned too that you started something that you didn't mean to start; it just kind of happened. Well,
yeah,
effective things happen because they're effective, and it meant something to them. So you're like, what? I'm going to emulate that because it meant something to me, and I hope it means something to somebody else. And so, because if it wasn't effective, nobody would duplicate it. It would just be like a thing. So that's awesome that you found that out through trial and error. So getting back to talent development, though, we talked about peer-to-peer developmental frameworks. We talked about on-the-job training. We've talked about formal education and indoctrinating people into the organization. Now, what about self-development? What do you view for people? Do you think that's just all you and the organization inputting into somebody, or do you ask of people that you work with, hey, I need you to invest in yourself, and how do you approach that?
yeah. So we do. I encourage people to. So I do personally. I read a book a week, and I do that because that was taught to me from somebody that mentored me. And they pretty much point blank said, "Hey, man, I'm putting more in this relationship than you're putting into yourself in this relationship." So if you're serious, and I'm not saying you have to read a book a week if you're serious about it, but this is what got my attention and what I was able to grab and run with. And so I realized he's right, and I need to respond to that. And so I encourage people, self reflection is huge. So spend time in the day reflecting on how can I be better, but also celebrating what you're doing that is on par. And then on top of that, so I'll send our leaders to different places that they want to get wisdom from. So our worship pastor really likes Hillsong Church. So, and he loves their worship and all that. So I'm kind of like a over the top kind of thinker sometimes and do stuff over the top. And so I was like, you know what? You need to go to Australia and you need to go. And so I responded to something that I knew he liked, but I also genuinely respected his heart. And I do respect his heart in it. So I know his self development will be okay. I'm going to invest time going on an airplane all the way to Australia. I'm going to fight jet lag, and I'm going to be on time to the conference. I'm going to get everything I can out of this experience in Sydney. So when I come back, I can get something out of this. And so, he'll probably pay for his meals and stuff like that, invest and sow into that type of thing. But I also encouraged, our other pastor and other team leaders, what are you doing to sow to, how are you sowing to where you want to be going? So, what are you putting into yourself that makes you arrive at the destination you desire? So, if you want to be like this strategic genius, what are you doing to learn strategic geniusness from? Like, you're not going to learn it from me. I'm very laissez faire, uh, fly by the seat of your pants. So, strategic is not in my nature. However, there's geniuses out there who do. Why are you wasting your time and certain pools that can't offer you that. And so I really do encourage them. And sometimes I'll just put them on their plate, be like, hey, you're going here this weekend. Love you. And they're like, okay, all right. But sometimes you have to do that and people have to do that to me to really try to get people to believe in themselves and see what you see in them, so they start putting into them what they need to put into them. And again, like these people, after years of doing this, and just their genuine, really phenomenal leadership and who they are as people, they sow into themselves, and they, if your thing is kids ministry, they're going to focus on, okay, families, and how do I impact children and impact families. If your worship, you want to go to people who effectively do it, not just on a Sunday morning level, but a global level. These are people who talk in a different dialect than us, but can effectively lead people of all different languages. So there's a lot to be received from them. I myself, I love to go to different leadership conferences and different creative arts conferences. That's kind of how my mind works. And I know that'll sharpen my gifts so that when all of us are together, we can collaborate dynamically. So I encourage them: self-reflection, self-feeding, read. You got to read. If you don't like to read, listen to audiobooks. Like, if you're too lazy to listen, we probably shouldn't work together. That's
Yeah.
that's kind of my thought,
That's
because you're probably not even listening to what I'm saying. So, and yeah, put into yourself and then work out. Don't be afraid to try out what you've received and see if it works. Like, be okay with failing forward. That is something we say a lot, as a team, and even as a church body. Let's fail forward, okay? Because if we're not trying, we're dying. So we got to try something, and we want to do things with excellence. So some things will be giant flops, and we're like, that was a good idea, but a bad idea for the city, or that was a great idea. We don't have the capability of pulling that off where we're at right now. So let's table that. And we only learn that through self-reflection, putting truth into us, and walking out what we're receiving.
no, that's awesome. That when you say fail forward, because the organization I kind of work for has a very, very limited appetite for failure. Even though all the senior people that I interact with always tell me, I failed several times. Awesome that you are allowed to have that room and latitude to do that. You should probably allow other people too. I think it's awesome that you've had that as a culture, and I mean that because for the people that work with me, I'll allow you to fail as many times as you need to, because through failure you learn. And a lot of people don't understand that you have to be able to try new things, and you have to be able to take what you've learned and what you're investing in yourself and experiment with it and see what works and what doesn't work. That's the only way that you're going to grow and get better, professionally and personally.
Yeah, I threw like, so kind of like a baseball metaphor. I threw probably 1,000 curveballs that didn't curve, but when I learned how to make it curve, it curved. And like, if we all need the freedom to learn that curve, because that's what keeps the opponent off guard. And so it's like, I think it's good that we have leaders that allow us to fail. Not that failing is the par. Like, you have to fail trying to
Right.
do
Yep.
something, not fail because you don't do jack. So fail trying to accomplish something. Like when we ride our bike, you're gonna fall. That's falling forward, though, because you're gonna ride that bike. And the same thought, okay, let's think of new strategies. Let's think of new techniques. Let's think of new flavors of things to impact people, to connect with people. And if it doesn't work, okay, we'll make note of that. In York County, South Carolina, that does not work.
Right.
It works somewhere else, but not here. And so, because like at Liberty, everything worked, right? Because it has to, because you, it does, right? When somebody owns a city, everything runs the way it's supposed to
Right.
go, and everybody in the city does what they want. But when you're in a small fish in a big pond, and you realize, okay, like, I need to fail and find ways where I can be effective, and not allow it to demolish me. but allow it to develop me. And so, yeah, failing forward. And then John Maxwell has a book, I think it's called Failing Forward. It's really good. It's very good.
Yeah, I've read it, and I'm a big fan of John Maxwell myself and his reading, so I love that book. And also, too, Babe Ruth, he held two records, a home run record and a strikeout record. So, a lot of people don't realize that. Everyone wants to focus on the positive side, but it's still a record, which is impressive that he struck out the most times than anybody in baseball history. Because he was trying to go after it every single time because he knew what his niche was. He's like, I'm a home run hitter. That's what I do. I'll strike out doing it, but that's what I do. So
and Prosper get back in the box.
Yeah. I mean, you got to get up and you got to get back in there and you got to try. So, so I know we're coming up about an hour and 20 minutes of being on here, and I appreciate everyone who has stuck and listen to this, because it's great stuff, and I don't want to cut the conversation short, but I do know it's almost 11 o'clock at night where we're at, and I know you have a family and a life, and so do I. So
a lot on Cherry Road, so
hopefully you're in a good location on that street.
I'm in the lights.
So that's important. Next time, probably pick a better place to park and have this conversation, even though I appreciate you doing it. So what are three things that anyone starting out in a nonprofit organization or in an organization that's strictly volunteer based, what are three things for leader development that you would say that they need to focus on starting out, or even if they're in it and they're having issues? What are three things that you would recommend?
We always hear love people. It's also important to remember to like them. When we stop liking people, we start caring about the greatest asset that we have at our reach. And so liking them is equally, in my opinion, as important as loving them. And when I like them, I'm going to root for them. I'm going to encourage them. I'm going to genuinely like seeing them do awesome things. And I'm going to genuinely like seeing them advance in ways that may otherwise be intimidating or cause jealous tendencies within me. So like them. Number two, believe in their uniqueness. In a world with 1,000 million different personalities, and seemingly sometimes when people have 1,000 different personalities in themselves, it's important that we celebrate the uniqueness of who they are, and we actively seek for ways to place them in significant areas. So celebrate their uniqueness. And then the last thing, I would say the last thing is, don't give anybody a job that you would be offended for taking. And I say that sometimes we just give a job to make somebody happy. We're not giving them significance. We're giving them a sentence. And we need to celebrate them significantly. And so, if I think to myself a lot of times, man, would I feel belittled if I was given this job? Like genuinely, would I feel like I was just being put aside, or do I feel like I'm being put in line to fight with everybody else and fight for the mission and the statement? And so those are three things that I've either made mistakes in, wish I would have done a lot better, but have really come to see them as truths that if I'm not operating in, I find myself as a very lonely leader, not having people leading with me. Because I'm blessed, man. I probably 90 people I serve with, in a group of 150. I serve with them in some capacity. It could be so easy if I don't value them, that it's just me leading 150 as opposed to me leading with 90 to the rest of the 150.
Yeah, no, those are three really good words of advice that you would give to people. Me being me, I never really would have thought about, it's important to like people as well as love them. Anyone who knows me,
saying it's easy.
No,
I don't like myself sometimes. So, yeah.
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, anyone who knows me, I could be quick to not say dislike people, but I'm very selective about who I am friends with and consider my inner circle. So it's not that I don't like you, I definitely love you, but yeah.
Very well put.
So, but no, that's a great point that you bring up,
That's
man.
good. No,
So,
that's good.
so I know I need to improve on that a lot more. So, thank you for bringing that up. But just to recap real quick, so what we talked about were identifying leaders that want to volunteer and serve in organizations and developing them through peer-to-peer and hierarchical developmental frameworks. Let people know what your mission, your vision is, and then define it, what those words mean, so people understand how to buy in to those things. We talked about self-development, that it's important to feed into yourself as well as everybody else mentoring you and bringing you into the fold as part of the organization. So those are the things that we talked about this time. So I definitely want to thank all of you for tuning into this episode and watching it. Definitely, if you are catching this on a recorded version on YouTube, if you have a question, definitely leave a comment. If you like this forum, please subscribe. That helps us generate more content and reach more people. Because honestly, genuinely, what we want to do here is have a discussion, not with just the person who's a special guest interview, but also people watching it, through the chat options and everything else. Because I think this is one forum that I like to use to help to develop and grow other people as well as myself. I know since I started doing this, I used to read a lot beforehand, but I'm even reading more now than I did before, just because I have to because I don't want to make sure that I'm up on it because I'm that anal on it. I want to make sure that I know as much as I can about a specific subject that I'm going to talk about, because that's just who I am. I don't think I know something unless I know how the screw goes into the computer and ties into the motherboard at some point in fashion. So if you like this, subscribe to it, comment down below. If you have a comment for, Dr. Nate Staton, he will also, check this out and respond back to you on this forum. And then if not, I'll make sure I get it over to him. Also tell your friends about our Podbean account, because we do a weekly podcast that we upload about various leadership topics, and we turn academic into something that you can use every single day. I know a lot of people think that you have to pay for fancy degrees and everything else, but on the flip side, you really don't. It's just people being people and taking care of people. So definitely wanted to take a look at that. So I do definitely want to close going out here and saying thank you again for listening to this episode. And I'm Tim Staton, stating the obvious.